Hi everyone, I'm Anna, software developer, passionate about quality from Ukraine. And that's how I typically speak of myself when I did an introduction and in the event like this one today. In addition, at different years throughout my career, I would add various details as to what my current professional focus was. We'll know how effective storytelling can take us further in our career and help us find and build relationships. So recently I attended a workshop called Tell Your Story. And during this workshop, we were practicing how to tell our story of origin, meaning where we come from, what our career path looked like, and where we are now. And to facilitate this task, we were offered an interesting exercise. We had to take a pen and paper and draw a visual representation of our career path and mark a few milestones or pivotal moments we think made a significant impact. And based on this, we would later compose our story of origin. And here is how I visualized my career path. The results of this simple exercise gave me a lot of food for thought. For example, am I so ignorant that I don't notice my own failures? Or do I see them as growth points and thus this path is steadily going up? Is this a result of consistency and hard work, or I was just lucky at some points? I guess it's a bit of both. But I'm here today to talk about another reflection of mine. As you see, for major of my career path, I had a steady professional growth at medium pace. And that's what you kind of would expect when a person is consistently practicing the same skill for a significant time, right? When I first started software development in 2012, after getting my master's in computer science, I would introduce myself as a junior software developer. I had a small experience with some frameworks, and I was yet to decide what I will focus on. Working in the field and gaining some experience and also learning from my talented colleagues, 3 years later, I would call myself a strong developer with focus on creating cross-platform mobile applications. Continuing this journey, I kept working in supportive teams where I could grow and learn, and eventually, after another 3 years, I would introduce myself as a senior mobile developer. As you see, so far it sounded like a natural evolution of skills and knowledge. But then something happened here. Some external force caused a mindset shift, which led me to this point 3-4 years later, where I would now introduce myself as Google developer expert, speaker at international tech conferences, Women Tech Makers ambassador, technical content author, open source contributor, and mentor. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. It was early 2020. I've been creating cross-platform mobile applications for almost 6 years using a framework called Xamarin. I've been also investigating another emerging framework called Flutter and was already using it for side projects for almost a year. And that's when I decided to switch it to it full-time and has quit my current job. I naively planned to have a short break and then find a new position focused on this new technology. Little did I know back then that COVID was just about to hit and the hiring across the globe will be frozen. Yeah. But that's a story for another day. The point is that I have switched technologies. And on its own, such a change isn't expected to have these dramatic consequences, right? Of course, it changes the opportunities that are opening or closing, depending on the type of the technology. But after all, I was just changing the tool for the same type of task, creating cross-platform mobile applications. That what I didn't realize back then is I was also entering a new community. Flutter community is a pretty unique place. At early stage, when it was just shaping up, as was the framework itself, the founders' team were extremely intentional in building inclusive, respectful, and supportive community. As a result, it has always been a nice virtual space where you would feel welcomed and elevated. In addition, because the framework was young and there was not that many educational content, it was very popular to create video tutorials, release courses, written content, various tips and tricks bits, and talk at technical conferences, popularizing the framework and spreading the knowledge. Inevitably, I got infected by similar ideas. When looking at achievements of others, I would be genuinely happy for them, maybe a bit jealous. But even though I was surrounded by this supportive community where members would cheer each other and praise their successes and wanted to have similar results, it still felt almost impossible for myself to achieve the same. The thing is, as with technical industry in general, the majority of technical community members were men, and even though they formed the biggest part of this supportive environment, I simply didn't have role models to look up to. I would see their successes as good for them, they can do this, not I can do this, at least with a reasonable amount of effort. Until I joined a much smaller community called Flutteristas, which you see I'm wearing their swag right now. It's a community for women and non-binary folks interested in Flutter framework. There, I found myself surrounded by talented women of different backgrounds. I met junior developers whose struggles I knew because I once was a junior developer myself. And I also saw very clearly the value I could bring to them if I start mentoring and educational activities. And I also met senior developers with backgrounds and skills similar to mine, but who were much more advanced in their careers than I was. And when I looked closer at their achievements and the effort it took them, then I realized, wait a moment, I can do the same. Let me see if this will bring me similar results. So that was the point at which the mindset shift happened. Because I met successful women in tech, I could relate to myself, basically my role models, and I got to know their stories. I was able to start activities that brought me where I'm now, like participating in mentorship programs, speaking at international tech conferences, and being very active in the community overall. One more important thing I got from that community was a safe space to practice and gain confidence and courage to speak to a broader audience. I'm a very shy person by nature, and I would oftentimes tell myself that my opinion doesn't matter. There are smarter people in the room to lead the discussion, and I would only speak up if I feel my input would add a real value. This community showed me that I have much more to say than I thought I had. And clearly, such self-doubt was a result of my own limiting beliefs, right? And these things are very hard to spot on your own. It either requires a high level of self-awareness, which not all of us are capable of at different points in our lives, or it requires someone else telling or rather showing and proving you the opposite. You know how it oftentimes is, you can be told all the wisdom in the world, but only when you see and feel it, that's when you actually start realizing its power and impact on you. And finally, I cannot talk about my career development without mentioning the impact of individual mentorship. I was very lucky to meet a person who would be passionate about mentoring aspiring developers early in my career. We worked together side by side for many years, even in different companies. And during this time, I would always get a professional advice, all kinds of support, and sometimes even slight push towards greater achievements. So these three levels of communities, the global international online community, the smaller community of women I could relate to, and the individual mentorship, together they formed an environment where the mindset shift I mentioned was just inevitable. Clearly, these achievements that came later were the result of my own effort, but their influence gave me the direction and the motivation to follow it. And that's how communities work in general, right? They create a sense of what's normal and kind of the default behavior among its members. Psychologists say that the results you have today is oftentimes the average of the results of your environment. And of course, it also depends on your personality type, external factors, but it's undeniable that we are daily influenced by people we listen to. And this influence can be used to your advantage. If you immerse yourself into the community of people that either have the same results that you want to have, or they're on their way and you can join them, it will be much easier to achieve what you want. This path from a developer to public speaker, educational content creator, and mentor is not necessarily what success would look like for you. This was only used as an example of a mindset shift that happened to me personally, thanks to the community I was surrounded by. But in general, this can be applied to any area of your life, not necessarily career or tech. If you want to get better at eating healthy, join groups that care about daily consumption and the quality of food. And if you have a friend who you think is particularly good at that, just have a lunch more often together. Or if, for example, you want to get into investment, maybe attend an event where you can be introduced to people who are experts in this field. If for now you don't immediately see an appropriate community around, you can still immerse yourself in the right ideas medium by subscribing to newsletters, taking online courses, watching inspirational videos on YouTube. Whatever might get you infected with the right ideas. Also, I have to admit, from my experience, the smaller a community is, and the stronger are your bonds with community individuals, the greater impact they will have. It's clear that's not the only way to have great results. And similarly, just joining the community without active participation won't advance you much. But it's definitely something that will make the process simpler and sometimes even seamless. Because your environments have such a great impact on you, there is also something to be mindful of. Toxic and hostile environments, which diminish whatever your successes are, will only minimize your motivation and energy level. So you'd better leave them as soon as possible. Basically, a community of any size may have this great influence on the mindset. But I see value in joining medium-sized communities in particular. It's quite hard to provide some exact measure characteristics to what a medium-sized means, because it really depends on how comfortable it feels to you. But the main criteria to me is that you should be able to build relationships with community members and be active. Back when I joined Flutterista's community, it had about 100 members, and it felt pretty comfortable to me. Now it's over 200 people, and I guess it might be intimidating for some members to be out on the spotlight. So why I emphasize the medium-sized communities in particular? I believe when you really can build relationships with individuals, feel empathy, and relate yourself to the role models you meet there, it will have the maximum effect. By the way, having regular meetings will greatly help with building these kind of relationships. They don't have to be frequent, but consistency is more important. Of course, having offline meetings where people are more present is fantastic, but online meetings with cameras on can also contribute to getting to know each other better. In addition to meeting role models you can look up to, you can get a very practical help out of communities on the things like rehearsing the talk you're going to present to a broader audience, or maybe giving a feedback to written content you're about to publish, or brainstorm ideas for new topics. In addition, tech communities are oftentimes full of opportunities shared by its members. It can be job opportunities, opportunities for free education or getting scholarship, or links to educational resources. And of course, opportunities for collaboration. As a side bonus, you may even get a chance to practice English, which can be beneficial for non-native speakers like myself. Now I'd like to dedicate a few words to female communities in particular, because I believe they may have a special impact on women in tech. First of all, because they offer higher chances of meeting role models you can look up to, and maybe have the same thoughts as I had, like, oh, interesting, I can do the same. And also, I feel like these communities have a special atmosphere of empathy and support, which overall positively influences your confidence. As a result, when communicating inside the community, you may notice that you speak more confidently, not being hesitant as to whether you should express your thoughts, and are actually encouraged to do so. However, I would say in this sense, female communities should be seen as training ground. The end goal of joining them should not be to isolate from the diverse reality of tech world, but to gain confidence, to feel more comfortable when speaking up in front of the mixed audience. Having said that, I prepared a few suggestions about community for women in tech that are worth checking out. I have to admit, those communities are very big, with thousands of members across the globe. So it's not the exact match for the medium-sized communities I was advocating for. But this you will have to look on your own. And as for global communities, after all, you will always be able to form smaller subgroups to create this cozy atmosphere. So the first community I recommend checking out is Women Tech Makers. This program is led by Google, and its goal is to empower women in their careers by providing access to curated resources and events, as well as information and tools. You can apply to join as a member, which will give you access to the Slack group where all the collaboration happens, a newsletter, useful workshops and events. And if you already have some technical community contributions, whether you were organizing events or participating as a speaker, you can apply to become a Women Tech Makers ambassador, which will give you the recognition from the program and also access to the Ambassadors Academy with tons and tons of useful content. The workshop I mentioned in the beginning about telling your story of origin, it was organized by this program, Women Tech Makers, exclusively for ambassadors. And by the way, every year during the months of April and March, this community holds their largest annual event campaign to celebrate women in tech, create connections, educate, and inspire the tech community. So next 2 months will be packed with themed events across the globe and online. Be sure to check the event map and join. And another community I'd like to mention is Women in Tech. They are on the ambitious mission to unite 100,000 of women in tech to foster innovation with purpose and impact. There are many ways you can participate in this community. They offer access to useful resources, newsletter, events, and job board. And they also run an annual Women in Tech Global Online Conference, typically late spring, early summer, where you get to attend a ton of useful and inspirational talks. Additionally, don't forget about the power of individual mentorship. Both these communities have mentorship programs, which you can read more about at their websites. Just Google Women Tech Makers or Women in Tech, and you won't miss them. And also, if you have interest in Flutter and identify as women or non-binary, we'd love to welcome you in our Flutteristas community. You can find the application form on our website. Once again, just Google Flutteristas. So this was my story, how joining the right community changed my mindset and empowered me to reach the next professional level, from being a good software developer to becoming a frequent speaker at tech conferences, mentor, and role model for a younger generation of women in tech. Most likely you already knew what powerful impact our environment can have on us. But even then, once again, I hope it was a nice reminder about simple things that form our lives. And I hope this story was inspirational and educational. Thanks for your time that you spent with me today.